Okay, so I came across this video on Facebook, and it's actually a good one to get me started on a series of videos that I'm going to be making on a similar topic that this video is basically touching on. And it's, how can I put it? I haven't come up with a final title yet, but it's loosely related to why black people need to give up on the idea, or why black people need to forget about slavery and negative every other negative event in American history. And I don't say that because I don't think it's something that we don't need to learn from. I say that because the history has been one-sided. A lot of other details have been left out, and we've been exploited by our emotions, and it hasn't worked out good for us. But we still refuse to get past the past. So I'm gonna let this video play. I'll stop it here and there to touch on certain points, but I found it interesting because it highlights why. Well, it's a good example of why I feel it's necessary and important for black people to get past the past of the negative history in America.
Do you honestly believe the U.S. government, this current U.S. government hates black people?
Well, the current U.S. government system is of the same system and same structure that it's always been, and it's we can call it mislike, we can call it an antipathy, but regardless, there is a difference in how the government treats and addresses black people or Africans in America in the way they do other.
Can you give me a couple examples?
Sure, and I'm glad you asked that. It's a great alley-oop, I call it, right? I'm gonna slam dunk it.
I stopped it real quick because he said he's going to slam dunk it. He's going to explain how black people are treated now, and we're treated differently throughout history. And this is one of the things he's not going to slam dunk it. Basically, he repeats a lot of things that were often said in the past by other pro-black activists that were incorrect. There were misconceptions of events in history that were, I wouldn't say lies, but they were misrepresentations of actual events that were spun to be mistreatment of black people. Now, I'm not saying that there wasn't examples of mistreatment of black people in history. It definitely was. But there was also a huge amount of exaggeration by people in the effort of making black people feel inferior and feel a certain way, feel like they never have a place and home here in America. And the reason why that's important is, how can you be successful? How can you thrive? How can you assimilate and build a foundation at home in a country that you don't feel is your home? And that's key. If you feel like you're constantly the victim, you're constantly being targeted, you're not going to feel like you're home. You're not going to create roots. You're not going to set a foundation for your lineage to grow and be prosperous. And it's worked. You know, the white liberals have really done a number to black people and making us feel this way, so we don't do that. So in a certain sense, it's correct that we were treated differently, but not in the way and by the people that he's speaking of. It wasn't necessarily all white people, and it wasn't necessarily the institution of slavery that really did the most harm to us, because as many people have outlined, from Thomas Sowell to Larry Elders, often talked about how immediately after slavery, those freed slaves were they showed the most growth of any generation of black people in America. And that's weird to think of. These people just came out of slavery and they showed the most progress and growth of any generation in black history. That should say a lot. It should show that it wasn't the slavery that was the determinant factor in American history of why there's slow growth in the black community and why we struggle. It wasn't slavery at all. It's more of the depiction of it and how this constant idea of us being a victim is what's really diminished our self-worth and being, and has kept us from actually building any substantial roots in this country. Like I said, you're not going to build a foundation and roots in a place where you don't feel at home. And the white liberals have done a bang-up job of making black Americans feel like this isn't home. I'll let them finish.
So if your audience, right, who are probably going crazy right now, this guy, said these things, the government hates black people. I want everyone to look up things like the war on drugs, which has targeted black people, mass incarceration. The FBI director, James Comey himself, and the New York head of police also said the origin of policing came from slave catching. We also can look at black codes, the vagrancy tactics, the bombing in Tulsa, Oklahoma, the bombing in Philly of the Wu family, all done by the U.S. government towards African people in America.
So you would say arresting people and keeping law and order is anti-black? By saying that, are you saying that black people inherently are the ones committing the crimes?
No, what I'm saying is that having a system,
which actually is the case in a lot of these situations. A lot of these situations, unfortunately, black people are the ones inherently committing most of the crimes, even though we're just a small fraction of the population. We commit up to, and I think in a lot of cases, over half of the crimes. And that's something that, unfortunately, a lot of these black activists do not want to talk about. Because it doesn't play into that same victim narrative. You can't be a victim if you're a perpetrator. So
a structure in place, right, from the post freedom or enslavement of black people, and where a system was created called the convict leasing system by our government, and where the same year that slaves were free, they created laws called vagrancy tactics that made it illegal for blacks to be homeless and would lock blacks up and put them in a convict leasing system.
But see, here's the thing. I hear what you're talking about with respect to America's history.
Right. The same practices are happening today.
Oh, I see homeless people all over the place, but I still don't see where you're justifying your current anger toward America or the American government. I can see you being upset about what may have happened in the past, but you cannot say it's occurring. Of course it's changed. The fact that you're in this studio right now talking the way you are is the best proof in the world that it's changed.
The fact that the 13th Amendment still says slavery was abolished except you commit a crime says that things are still the same. And when you have inmates working in prison,
does it actually say that? I don't know.
Majority of whom are Africans in America,
someone
who are making 20 or 30 cents a day.
Jay, why are the majority of people in prison of African descent?
Because the African people in America were never repaired after their enslavement, after their Jim Crow.
And see, that's one of the biggest things that I hate. He asked a fair question: why are most of these African Americans imprisoned in America? And he said that we were never repaired. And I hear that a lot from a lot of black activists. And I don't want to undermine what somebody says, or disrespect what somebody says, because they're coming from a genuine place, but they're also coming from a place of brainwashing, indoctrinating, and a lot of propaganda that's been pushed on them. And it's quite dumb if they think a little bit longer about what they're saying. The reason why black people are in prison overwhelmingly over any other race is because black people weren't repaired after slavery. We weren't repaired after Jim Crow. We weren't repaired after the segregation laws, which is complete bull. And I'll explain why it's bull. What other act do we require someone to repair us, where we require our attacker, so to speak, or where we require the perpetrator to repair the victim? Like, let's say if you were brutally attacked, and would it be the same? Would it be fair to say the person that was brutally attacked has a less chance of recovering from that attack unless the attacker helps that person to recover? No, you help yourself to recover. The same way, if you're in an abusive relationship where a person is controlling, they're verbally abusive, they're mentally abusive, and you suffered trauma because of this, is the only way for you to recover from that is for the perpetrator to help you heal? You mean to tell me you won't be healed? You can't find healing unless the person that did wrong to you helps you to heal. They have a hand in helping you heal. I think that's asinine, and I think it's a little bit naive to think that that is required in order for healing to happen. It's an excuse that we give ourselves as Black people as to why we're not doing better in society, when the answer isn't hard to find. The answer is actually very simple. The answer is basically, we haven't healed as Black people in America. We haven't found our healing, which comes from us because we've been conditioned repeatedly since Jim Crow, since segregation laws, since slavery. We've been conditioned to constantly view ourselves as a victim. We've been trapped in this mind state, this emotional state of perpetual victimhood. That is why we have not been healed. And it's kept us from holding ourselves accountable. It's kept us from holding each other accountable when we do things wrong. That's why whenever the host of the show brings up Black on Black crime, the guy says, well, why is that always a pivot? Why do you always go there? Why are you not going there? Because it's a big issue. You look at that as a deflection when he brings that up, but that is a key issue that we're not bringing up. And when we fail to look at ourselves and do our own self-healing, we'll never make any progress. We'll always be stuck in this sense of victimhood where we look towards somebody else to blame for us not progressing rather than looking towards ourselves, because our progress can only come from us and God. So if we're going to be waiting for white people to help us heal, we're never going to heal, because you shouldn't rely on somebody else's actions for you to progress. You should always look for a way where you can have the most influence and effect on your advancement and progress in life. And that's really the reason why we haven't seen it, because we keep buying into these people telling us the same sad story, the same sob story of how we're a victim. And then they keep pushing it on us every single day, saying, see, it hasn't changed. See, it hasn't changed. They use every single instance that happened in society as an example of white supremacy or racism, when it's actually not the case. Anything that goes on that involves a white person doing something against a Black person, it is deemed as racism, an example of white supremacy. And it could be just a simple situation of you get an asshole being an asshole to another person. Not white supremacy or racism. It's just a bad person doing something bad to another person. And the media is where it's most obvious. If you pay attention to the words that's being said whenever there's a report or something, they bring up race whenever it's a white person committing a crime or assaulting or doing something wrong to a black person. They say the person's race along with the crime or along with whatever was done wrong. And that's not done by accident. Look at 2 news stories or look up many. Look at every single one where it's a white person doing something to a black person. The race is brought up. Look at a situation where a black person is doing something to a white person. The race is not brought up. Look at a situation where a black person is doing something against another black person. The race is not brought up. Or a black person doing something to a person of another color besides white people. The race is not brought up. The only time race is brought up is when it's a white person as the perpetrator and the black person as the victim. The race is brought up almost 100% of the time. And it's the reason for it is so that we will always have in the back of our mind this constant reminder and thought that, it was racism behind that. See, we haven't advanced any further than before during segregation and Jim Crow in the 60s and 70s and all this stuff. We haven't advanced any further because this stuff is still going on every day today when it's actually really not. The same stories that we hear every single day, the media portrays it as if it's a racial situation. So I'm going to let this play a little bit more and I'm going to cut it short because I didn't mean for this to be a long drawn out video. Just a precursor to the series that I'm going to be starting on why black people need to forget about slavery.
After the government redlined them, after the government never gave any restitution for the Holocaust enslavement of African people. So if you don't repair a people or you put them in ghettos and you put them poor and uneducated in ghettos, you're going to get that kind of activity.
You know, it's interesting when we have this conversation, you know, sometimes I drive home on the West Side Highway. It's a little cluttered, so I'll take the slow route. And I drive through some of my old neighborhoods that I lived in throughout Harlem. And I see them now, and they're becoming what they call gentrified. So it's the same neighborhood, the same buildings, but less graffiti, less garbage on the street. Right. So what makes a ghetto a ghetto? Not the buildings, not the neighborhood, right?
Correct.
Right. So the way people treat the buildings in the neighborhood makes it a ghetto. Who can you blame that on other than the person in the mirror?
There's 2 accountabilities. There is self-accountability for Africans in America, that we have to repair ourselves because of the trauma that we suffered. But I liken it to if you take someone who was kidnapped, right? And or a woman or a man who was molested for several years, and then they're pushed out of the house that they were molested in, and then they go out in the streets and they're promiscuous. You blame them for being promiscuous, but you don't blame the person who caused the trauma.
Yeah, it's a stretch.
See, it's not a stretch.
You do blame the person that caused the trauma, but you don't say that that person won't be healed and they can't see and find any type of comfort and healing for themselves until the perpetrator heals them. That's what you don't hear. But that's what he's basically saying and making like we can't find or move past all of the bad things that happened to us in the past. We can't move past it until we get healing and repair from the people that did it. It's a load of crock.
Was there or was there not? So if there was never trauma for this kind of treatment, right? I'm talking about the human rights violations of Africa.
We're talking about the individual, not the history. You know, one thing, I gotta tell you something.
They come together, King.
They don't.
They come together. If they did, if there wasn't a need for repair of people, then the Japanese Americans wouldn't have been repaired or had restitution after their 2 years internment camps in America. Or the Jewish Germans wouldn't have gotten repair.
Are you saying all it would take in your mind then is some sort of restitution check from the government?
I didn't say check.
No, well, you're saying some sort of restitution.
Repair aid, restoration.
And let's be clear, these other races that he mentioned, Germans and the Japanese, they weren't repaired by the American government. They may have been given money. That's not repair. As everybody knows, money doesn't repair you as a person. and as far as the Germans go, I'm not sure if they even got anything. But here's the thing that I want to basically bring to light with this. During the time of slavery, this was a worldwide activity. This was commonplace around the world. And only here in America do we have people saying that we need to be repaired by the government in order to advance as a people. But the thing is, do you see anybody else having that same sentiment here in America? That is, because like I said, the institution of slavery was not just synonymous and just isolated to the Western region being the Americas. America. It wasn't just isolated to America. This was a global activity, and had been a global activity for some time. And even though there were different iterations and different institutions of slavery, it had been the norm for the longest. So this isn't just a black and white thing. As a matter of fact, slavery wasn't even a issue of race until more recently in the Americas. And that was done, I believe, with ill intent and certain intentions as far as psychologically breaking you down. But I think it was more of an after thought and effect, the race thing to it. I think it was this was something that was a byproduct and something that was capitalized on when they saw that it could have a psychological advantage. It could have an advantage psychologically to manipulate people in the way that they had and control them and use their emotions to control them. And that's what has been going on. You have a group of people that's been pretty much exploited by their emotions. But as far as slavery goes, and as far as the effects that it's had on people, period, the only people that can bring you up is you and the rest of your people. And that's where we've been manipulated out of doing that. We've been given this false hope, this false ally in the liberals, because they make as if they care about this when what they're actually doing is preventing us from moving past it by keeping it alive, by constantly depicting it in TV shows, by constantly depicting it in movies, by constantly depicting it on the news, constantly depicting it in movies. So there is no moving past it because they're not letting us move past it. So, yeah, I it's one of those things where I really wish, I don't see much hope. Well, very little hope, but it's one of those things where I really wish that we could move past, because it is something it is the main thing that is holding Black people back in America and keeping us at the point where we're the only racial group in America that has not grown, and we're at the same level that we were in decades ago. We haven't grown. We're the only racial group that has not grown here.
Let me tell you something. There are no black people in America right now who were ever slaves. Not a single one. Right. There are no white people in America at this point who were ever slave owners.
Correct.
Okay.
But is there not residual effects of that?
The overwhelming majority.
Are there no residual effects of that?
Not for the average person on either side.
Is there no
not for the average person for the either
How
side.
How do black people get to the ghettos you talked about?
You have to escape
Did the government
yourself.
not redline?
Like I was just saying before, you had people that literally came directly out of slavery, and that didn't bother them. They were actually experiencing real racism. They were actually experiencing real Persecution. You're talking about residual effects. We're not seeing any residual effects. Not even in the slightest bit. We're experiencing depictions that's keeping us in a fearful state constantly, thinking that any interaction that we have with a white person, any bad interaction that we have with a white person is racism.
Black people put red lines on the map. Google it if you don't know, King. The government put black people into ghettos through redlining. That created it.
Jay,
is that right
ultimately, we are in a point right now.
Did the government not create COINTELPRO, a government program that broke up civil rights leaders and assassinated our people? Did the government not do that? You can put good people in a bad system.
And I'll say this, like I've always said, the real civil rights leaders that we had, the real ones that was actually fighting and didn't sell out to the government and the liberal establishment, the real ones that we had, guess where they are? They're dead. Guess who killed them? It wasn't just white people. It was black people and white people. Look at the black leaders that we have now that was alive during that time. Your Jesse Jacksons, your Maxine Waters, your what was the other guy's name that just recently passed away? I forget his name. All those people, in my book, were extreme sellouts. They were the sellouts. The real ones were killed. Pay attention to what they did as opposed and what they were saying as opposed to what Martin Luther King's, Malcolm X's, and all the other ones. Look at the differences in what they were saying and what the ones that are still alive are saying and doing. And as far as, this guy saying we need repair and restitution from white people, the institution of slave and even how white people got slaves in America through the transatlantic slave trade. If you're going to blame white people, you have to blame other races as well. You have to blame Middle Easterns, Arabs, and you have to blame Africans. This was not done through white people coming into Africa and kidnapping and stealing a bunch of black people. Here's what you don't understand and what we weren't taught. They weren't stolen. They were sold. Slavery and selling of other black people and other races was highly profitable. It was a trade. These people came and bought and traded to obtain black slaves. So did the Arabs in Northeast Africa, I think, Northwest. So did Arabs in more numbers than white people did. Probably double the number of black people, of Africans, were sold to Arabs, Middle Easterns, and some other Asian regions in higher numbers than the colonists to America, the people from Europe, much higher numbers. And they were far more brutal to those slaves than the white Americans were. But we don't know about that. We don't even talk about it. Most black people don't even know about that. Only thing they know, white slave owner, black slave. They don't know about African slave owner, Arab slave owner, Spanish slave owner. They don't know about most of them. Like I said, this was an institution that was normal in that time globally. But we're waiting for just one specific people to repair us. You can hold your breath and wait if you want. You'll be waiting. It's not going to happen. You don't get healing and repair and growth from somebody else doing it for you. It doesn't happen. No other race that faced persecution waited for the persecutor to make them whole, except for us. We're the only one waiting for the persecutor to make us whole. We'll be waiting. I hope you don't hold your breath while you're waiting, because it's not going to happen. For one, there's nothing that we today as black people really need from white people or anybody else to help us move on and be prosperous and grow and have some type of emotional and mental healing. That comes from us. And it starts by us forgetting this notion and the BS that's being put on us by the media every single day. You have to, and when I realized what was going on, I had to start doing this. When I watch a movie, when I watch a TV show, when I watch the news, I see it purely as entertainment. Now that I know what's going on, I don't internalize what I see as a depiction of reality. I see it as a depiction of deception and propaganda to brainwash me and other black people and white people and anybody else in America to see what they want us to see and how they want us to feel.
But the company culture is screwed up, then it's going to play out in the market. Well, the market for us is a treatment of African people in America. And it's proven by, Jane Elliott said it best. You can ask a room full of European Americans, white people, and ask them, will you trade places with the treatment of African American? And not one would say yes. If it was fair, they all would say, sure, I would. So ask your white friends at home and ask them, would you trade places with the treatment of black people in America?
I think a lot of white people will trade nowadays, because a lot of them it's starting to be a switch in the behavior and the condemnation and persecution. It's not what being white right now is not the in and cool thing, because they ask any random person how they feel about a white man. I'll wait. Ask any person how they feel about a white man, and they will not have something good to say. Would you trade places with a white man right now?
America, and not one would, because we all know it's unfair.
Well, I don't want to speak for all white people here, but I will say a lot of people would probably turn around and say the worst part about the treatment of black people in America is how black people treat each other in America.
But see, why is it always a spin?
It's not a spin. It's a fact. If we're laying out the factual issues, and we're going to rank them in terms of what's the most critical in terms of making black life miserable in America, I personally think I would put the way black people treat black people at the top.
I'm all for self-accountability. I call you king, and I call all our black women queens to purposely elevate and uplift them. That's what
That's another thing. I hate that. Stop doing that dumb stuff. Stop doing that, because we all can't be kings and queens, and not all of us are. You know, there's a certain level of behavior and a certain level of self-respect and humbleness that comes with, you know, royalty. And don't call me king or queen, because there's only one king in my opinion, and that's Jesus. I don't see myself as on that level. Don't call me king, or, you know, my wife is a queen in this household, but it's not like, you know, royalty queen. Like, stop doing that. We find all these other superficial ways that's supposed to make us feel better about ourselves, when it doesn't really take all of that. It really don't. It don't take us calling each other king or queen for us to feel good about ourselves. It's just having a level of self-respect, and having a level of self-respect and also respect for each other. You don't have to call each other king or queen. Messed up thing is you got people calling each other king or queen in one voice, and in another part of their life, they attacking, you know, that same depiction of king or queen by what they say to them, how they act towards them, and even violence. So the words is cheap, you know. Live it. Don't just say king and queen.
I've been doing it for a year now. I don't use any other words other than king or queen referring to our own, because we've been personally degraded. We degrade ourselves, and we've been degraded. But we always spin the point.
It's not a spin. How do we fix that?
You have to.
How do we fix that? Black people.
When does the perpetrator take acceptance? Right? You want the victim to take acceptance, but when does the perpetrator, the government who created this system,
not the government,
that has abused and traumatized the
not
people?
The government. I'm talking about the young brothers who are going to kill each other this weekend.
I know
all
what you're talking about. I'm okay with self-accountability.
Killing each other?
No, I'm okay with self-accountability.
How do you fix that then?
How do we fix that? It's through our repair curriculum. Right now, we're repairing ourselves by unifying ourselves. I have a solution for us. The solution for us is for us to get some self-dignity, self-pride, by us unifying, understanding that before we're American, we're African first.
See, that part is fine. I'm good with that part. It starts with us. Only we can do this. And the thing is, when he goes into this whole spiel about us being Africans first instead of Americans, I think that's a load of crock. You know, because none of us been to Africa. We don't know anything about the African culture. And the African people don't accept us as being one and the same as them. We were born here. We have a lineage here. This is who we are. Be proud in that as Americans. No other race, as far as people that are proud of, you know, to be Americans. You look at yourself as American. You know, yeah, we're black. And as far as being African American, most of us, our lineage is so far removed from that continent, it seems a little silly to refer to us as African American. The only thing African about us is our skin color and the texture of our hair. Those are physical attributions. It really means little.
That's why it's African American. And when African people realize that we are one people who are the source of African cultures and tribes and countries that were brought here, captured here, and been left in this crap to deal with it ourselves, then we'll unite and we'll fix our own problems. But we cannot forget the perpetrator who caused this misery for us.
I think we're all Americans first and foremost. First and foremost, yes. I'm an American, and
you're African American.
I'm of African descent, and I'm proud of that.
Right.
But I'm more proud of being an American more than anything else.
Were American. They were African.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I'm not gonna play this whole video, even though it's almost done. It's about a minute or so left. He's just pretty much saying the same thing, not saying the same thing over and over, and not really saying anything else different. I just found it interesting, especially in light of what I was already planning for my series of videos that I'm working on. I found it interesting, and I found it a good starting point to kind of lead into that. It's one of those things that I really hope that we could get past as people, and not only just black people, but I think Americans as a whole, because the left has done a really good job of, they've perfected this first with black people, and now they're moving it into the rest of the races in America. You now have Hispanics, Spanish people, feeling like victims in America of racism from white people. You have Asians, from East Asians to Indians, Arabs, Sikhs, all these other people feeling like they're having the same mentality as black people are having. The weirdest thing that I've seen recently is Indian panhandlers. I've never seen that before. It's weird. I see them in the streets near my house. Is a couple regular Indian panhandlers. Now, it could be maybe because this is a predominantly Asian area where you get Koreans and Indians. But I'm not new to, I've lived in another area that was predominantly Indian before. And I've never seen as many Indian people panhandling. and I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but it feels like it's kind of attributed to this new age of victimhood that's being put on people, and everybody feeling like they're a victim of the white supremacists. And I think it's a load of crock. And I think we all need to stop. We owe it to ourselves to stop it, because it's not hurting anybody else but us. We are the ones that are going to be on the losing end of this victimhood mentality. It is in our best interest to move beyond it, to move beyond slavery, Jim Crow, segregation, and all those things that happen bad to Black Americans. We need to move beyond it. It is something that is essential for us to do. And moving beyond it and forgetting it doesn't mean that it didn't happen. It just means that you're not going to let that past dictate your future and your life and how you look upon life. That's moving past it. So, with that being said, that's pretty much all I have to say for this video. If you like the video, like it, subscribe, share it, leave a comment, give me your input in the comment section. Be respectful, because I will delete it or just ignore it. Either one. But also hit the bell, because I'm going to be uploading my a few series. I'm going to have a few series that I'm working on, but the one that I'm working on right now that I think a lot of you would want to see is the one I haven't decided on a title for the series, but basically saying why Black people need to forget about slavery in America. So, like I said, like it, subscribe. Thanks for watching. Peace.